Look at this guy. Or that girl. Or that girl. Why are they removing their shoes? Stay tuned for this week's episode of Sex in UPLB.
Hi, I'm Quinn and we're here at the UPLB main library to conduct our social experiment on conformity. First of all, what is conformity? Conformity is a type of social influence involving a change in belief or behavior in order to fit with the group. This change is in response to real or imagined group pressure. This involves pressure caused by the physical presence of others or pressure caused by social norms and expectations.
The University Main Library is one of the most visited campus locations here in UPLB. Most students would come here to study, research, or relax from all the hot hell the campus is. Today, we're here to conduct a social experiment on conformity. Our team decided to choose the stairwell to the basement of the UPLB Main Library as the location of our experiment. To put it simply, we'll be setting up pairs of shoes provided by our team outside the entrance of the basement area. Everyone inside the room will be asked to participate in the experiment and remove their shoes, place them outside, and pretend that they never knew why they had to take their shoes off. We also set up different cameras in different parts of the room to take record of all the subjects of the experiment. In this social experiment, we will be observing whether our incoming subjects will remove their shoes based on the group size who will conform to this untold no-shoe policy. Without further ado, here are the results of our experiment. On the first trial, there were no actors involved to interact with the subject. As you can see, she sees the shoes that were lined up outside the room. She then peeks inside and sees that everyone was on their socks. Let's play the guessing game here. Do you think she will A. Remove her shoes as she goes inside? B. Enter the room wearing her shoes? Or C. Play rock, paper, scissors with herself to decide whether she will go inside or leave? Have you taken your guess? Well, the answer is B. But why? As she peeks inside, she sees someone pass by with their shoes on. Such behavior is called a deviant behavior. Deviance is described as action or behavior that violates social norms, including a formally enacted rule as well as informal violations of social norms. There are two types of deviance. One is formal deviance, which can be described as a crime, which violates laws in society. Meanwhile, informal deviance are those minor violations that break unwritten rules of social life. Let's go back to the experiment. This deviant behavior by this person contributed to her decision on whether she would leave her shoes on or not. And she's not the only one. According to our observations, as long as there exists an individual that defies the social norm, the social pressure is lifted from that person. So as this guy, he walks in and observes from outside the door on what's going on. However, a man immediately enters with no holds barred, wearing his shoes on, and as he sees this man, he then decides to enter the room with his shoes on too. Here's another one. This girl deftly walks toward the door and sees the shoes lined up outside the room. She gently opens the door, carefully observing the people inside until she sees the man who was wearing shoes. You can see that they weren't really the only one who waited for an outlier of the group. However, there were a lot of other instances too wherein people entered the room with their shoes on without giving second thought about it. When asked about them, most of them said they didn't really notice that everyone had no shoes on and that they just thought it was really inconvenient to remove their shoes. There were also individuals that had second thoughts coming in without any deviant behavior being observed. Look at this man. He goes in and looks inside and then decides to go for the loo. He then goes back after to enter the room after giving thought about it. Same goes for this woman and this man. When asked, they argued that they thought some people removed their shoes because they were dirty or wet from the rain, and since they didn't think their shoes were dirty, they decided to enter wearing one. You can see that this man just wipes his shoes on the ground, maybe having the same thought as the first two people who reasoned out the same thing, and that wiping it on the floor would just do. This thing is called situational attribution. Situational attribution is the tendency of assigning the cause or responsibility of a certain behavior or action to outside forces rather than internal characteristic. In this case, some of them thought that our actions and behavior is somehow affected by environmental or situational factors, something that is beyond their control. With 0 actors, no one conformed to the policy. Now let's try adding 1 actor. Here, we have Kyle as our actor. He walks out of the room and sees our target. As you can see, as our target enters, she looks at the mirror immediately and then decides to remove her shoes. Finally, we have someone who followed the behavior of one of our actors. But why is that? In social psychology, we have this thing called social influence. Social influence is defined as the change in behavior that one person causes in another intentionally or unintentionally as a result of the way the changed person perceives themselves in relationship to the influencer, other people, and society in general. This particular type of social influence is called normative social influence, which leads to conformity. That is, the influence of other people that leads us to conform in order to be liked and accepted by them. The power of normative social influence stems from the human identity as a social being with the need for companionship and association. Normative social influence involves a change in behavior that is deemed necessary in order to fit in a particular group. The need for a positive relationship with the people around us leads us to conformity. This fact often leads people to exhibiting public compliance, but not necessarily private acceptance of the group's social norms in order to be accepted by the group. However, throughout the experiment, it was still observable that most people did not conform because of the previously stated reasons: deviance and situational attribution. There were also cases when some of the targets were in the group, so the pressure or influence brought by one actor wasn't really that effective. If their group decides to not remove their shoes, then most of them will probably don't. So let's try adding more actors. As you can see, as we increase the number of actors, people were more likely to conform. However, there were still some who did not conform to the group. the experiment, we interviewed some of the subjects of the experiment, and here were their thoughts on the social experiment.
Hi, I'm Johanna Feliz Gonzalez.
Course.
PS Nutrition, batch 2015.
Yun. Matanong lang po namin kung bakit po kayo nagtanggal ng sapatos niyo.
Kailangan ko yun.
Game.
Ano po, kayo na lang po. Bakit po hindi nagtanggal yung sapatos?
Naisip ko kasi, kaya tinanggal kasi maputik yung shoes nila. Ayun, may galing kasi kami sa loob ng building, tapos na yung ulan. So kami, hindi maputik yung shoes namin.
Bakit po kayo hindi ba't po kayo nagtanggal yung sapatos?
Since marami pong gumagawa dun, parang hindi oblige, parang feeling ko nag-oblige ako na sundin ko.
Kaya same din, kasi kahit di ba maulan, so akala ko pinatanggal sa inyo, since okay naman yung shoes namin. Okay.
Kasi madaming pero ayun, hindi ko siya, tinanong ko muna dun sa lumabas kanina kung bakit nakakagubad ng shoes. Natural, common din naman nandito. Pag napasok mo, di mo nagugubad. So, di mo na ako pumasok, to-confirm mo.
Kasi po majority ay nakita kong gumawa nun, kaya po no other reason wala po.
Kasi ang una kong naisip is, ayun nga, baka siguro kaya nga nagtanggal sila ng sapatos kasi umulan, mabutik.
Kasi obvious naman na nagtanggal sila, so tatanggal na din ako.
Kaya hindi ako nagtanggal ng sapatos kasi, kaya diba tinag ko yung parang wala namang mud, so hindi na lang ako nagtanggal.
Sumunod lang ako kung anong ganun rules.
Kasi parang ang inconvenient, I mean, ang easy sa feeling.
Okay.
Yun lang.
Yun lang. Okay ba?
Naka-chinelas kasi siya kaya nagubad.
Hindi lang po, kasi po kaya feeling ko na may mga sapatos sa labas kasi di ba umulan po kanina.
Aba.
So mga basa, nag-jeep po ako ngayon papunta dito.
Aba.
Tapos di lang po umulan na po dito. Parang sure na po ako na hindi pa basa sa sapatos.
Nung una, nakakabad na ako ng chinelas. Tapos may nakasalubong akong kaklase ko.
In conclusion, our group found these factors that may have or had affected our subject's decision making. 1. It was because it was raining outside. 2. The number of people doing the act. 3. Seeing the existence of any deviant behavior inside the room. And 4th, which was quite unexpected, was the tradition of removing shoes inside our home. Seeing all the results of the experiment, we have concluded that there is a relationship between the pressure brought by the physical presence of a larger group and the behavior of a particular individual will show. Specifically on this no-shoe policy experiment, group size does affect the degree of when an individual will conform. That's all for today. We hope you learned a lot from this episode. Stay tuned for more episodes next week, only here in SOSC UPLB.